Welcome to the Right to Reason podcast. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. Many of you are feeling stressed out lately. Corona, bills, shootings, politics. There's a lot going on. Even Satan shoes. If you work in the service industry or pretty much any profession that you're having to deal with people, then you've seen the worst of us over this last year. Today we are talking to two mental health professionals about how to keep our heads together and not lose our shit. Let's get started.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
We are facing an incredibly contagious and dangerous virus that is moving across the world from one hotspot to another.
These are children, and they are not insurgents, and we are not being invaded, which, by the way, is a white supremacist idea, philosophy.
Rapper Lil Nas X is making a lot of news today over a new line of controversial sneakers.
Some officers have been seen taking selfies with rioters or letting them through.
We are coming on the air with breaking news out of Washington, where the U.S. Capitol complex is on lockdown and people outside have been advised to take cover after what officials call an external security threat, apparently a car ramming a barricade outside the Capitol.
So you better check yourself before you check out. I know the breakdown. Everything is gonna shake now someday.
This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
Today we're talking to Dan Carini. He's a therapist and social worker manager. And my friend, Michael Moore, occupational therapist. Always good to have you on, Mike.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Nice to be here. Thank you. Absolutely. So, guys, I was looking at the CDC website recently, an article that they posted on coping with stress. It says, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a major effect on our lives. Many of us are facing challenges that can be stressful, overwhelming, and cause strong emotions in adults and children. Public health actions such as social distancing are necessary to reduce the spread of COVID-19, but they can make us feel isolated and lonely and can increase stress and anxiety. Learning to cope with stress in a healthy way will make you, the people you care about, and those around you become more resilient. The first thing they recommend doing, it kind of surprised me. I mean, it makes perfect sense. I don't know. I wouldn't have expected this to be their first piece of advice. It says, take breaks from watching, reading, or listening to news stories, including those on social media. It's good to be informed, but hearing about the pandemic constantly can be upsetting. Consider limiting news to just a couple times a day and disconnecting from phone, TV, and computer screens for a while. That makes so much sense. My daughter it's like this whole COVID thing's really freaked her out. 16-year-old girl. She hears about it all the time at school. It's all she talks about. And sometimes, you know, I want to listen to her and I want to be available to her as a resource, but I'll just tell her, hey, we're not talking about that right now. We're just not going to have a conversation about COVID this morning. You know, eat your eggs.
Very Jordan Peterson. Just go clean your room.
Yeah.
There's something, I think, to be said for that. I have this conversation with a multitude of patients throughout the week who, you know, I go into the home and, you know, there's Fox News on or there's CNN on and they're perseverating on the daily diet of news horror and sensationalism of it all. While at the same time struggling with severe health issues. And I just, you know, I'm very blunt. I says, you know, just go ahead and turn it off. You know, we're really, and I hate saying this, but there's a truth to it. You know, we're really helpless at this level to do anything about this right now. And getting control of, you know, ourselves and the immediate environment is, you know, what I'm there to assist with and try to help facilitate, and helping them be more functional in their environment. So, yeah, that's the reality of it. And I've done that in my own life. You know, I limit myself to only I was doing like 7 to 10 news articles every morning with a pot of coffee before I kind of get out the door. And while at the same time sort of having, you know, the news on with subtitles, thinking that, you know, that the universe needs me to do that. Right. And I'm helping in some way. But after a while, it's just, you know, why am I doing this? I'm not benefiting from it. Yes, I want to be aware of, I want to be informed, I want to be a knowledged, literate participant of our democracy, but there's really only so much you can do, and helping to sort of curate your own news consumption in a healthy manner And it is a difficult thing to ascertain it at these troubled times.
I think Michael actually walked kind of past the point I usually bring in with my clients who are mostly struggling with mental health, a lot of which is exacerbated by any kind of stress.
Right.
Anxiety, depression, whatever it happens to be, stress is going to make it infinitely worse. But the issue when you're talking about mindfulness in the context of news consumption is how much power do you have and how much does the information help you make better choices? I mean, once you know how masks work and how viruses work, you kind of know what you need to do. And beyond that, most human beings are going to want as much information as possible because information lets us predict what's going to happen. It lets us make good decisions. It lets us have this illusion that you both kind of talked about of control. And unfortunately, in a pandemic, there is no control. So when you're talking about mindfulness in this regard, the thing I like to come back to is kind of how much can you do? How much can you affect what's going on around you? And if the answer is I've done what I can and I'm doing the best I can, then it's time to turn it off until you need to know more, until you need to check in. And for a lot of people, the illusion of control comes out of bathing in this,
Yes.
sea of information. So that would be the thing I would kind of just take it one step further back and say, you're not in control of the pandemic. And so to be mindfully aware of your own limits helps you draw what you need to draw to say, where do I stop with the TV? Like if I'm just watching to see how many people are dead in California this month, I want to know it. I want to have that statistic to throw around in my internet arguments. But other than that, once I know it, can I turn off everybody crying at the emergency room?
That's you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, you articulated it quite beautifully with good brevity there. Yeah, the illusion of control, and at some point you've gleaned what you need to know from the headline or from the news article, and it's time to turn it off and move on.
I have a friend that he's been on the podcast once in an episode about American history because the guy is just a big history buff named Eric, and he recently got off Facebook, and he said he feels great. He told me my mornings are so much better. The first thing you do when you get up, your alarm's going off. It's usually your phone. So you're already, the first thing you make contact with, even before a loved one, is this little box of demons. And then you take it to the bathroom with you, and first moment of the day, and you're already in some kind of argument about whether the earth is flat or something, worse.
Yeah, I've been taking breaks from my phone. I mean, in my morning prep now and exercise routine, I have a large dog. I really look forward to taking for a walk every morning and afternoon, and that's a really quiet time of reflection and sort of connection that I have with my dog. And I don't take my phone, and we go out, and I don't care what time it is, and I'm often late for meetings, and I missed a whole meeting one morning. Had to apologize to my boss, and I just told the truth. I was walking my dog. It was a beautiful morning. It was very warm here in Michigan, and I'm going for a long walk, and that's what I needed to do.
What's stranger to me is actually when people are checking their phones like during a therapy session. I actually have a 4.5 mile walk I do like every couple of days, and I leave my phone in my car when I do it for that reason itself. But I think what Robert was kind of talking about also is, it's not just that you're checking in with the news media, it's that you're checking in with a specific source. Facebook, the illusion of being connected to all these people, you get to see how it's impacting their life. And you see, unfortunately, a lot more negative because that tends to be what gets shared. And that tends to be what goes viral. And like you were talking about, Michael, when it's Fox News or CNN, well, are they going to share good news or are they going to share bad news? Are they going to scare you, things that kill you in your kitchen, news at 11. They've been doing that forever. That's their bread and butter. That's how it works.
And also, go on. I'm sorry, go on if you're finished.
No, please.
You again said something really important as well that I think we're all beginning to notice with Facebook. It's an illusion of connection. I'm reluctant to give it up because I've got a few friends out of state and overseas and things that it's my way to sort of check in with them a few times a week to see how they're doing, but it's heavily curated to give an illusion, and we all do that, and it's not dishonest. It's just the reality of social media and online communication. But But if we're in these times, it gives you an illusion of connection, and I think it falls short. And I think that it's almost like an addiction, so you need more and more and more of it. And if you think at some point it's going to actually fulfill that, but it never does,
Well, that's a really common way people, speaking back to mindfulness, that's a really common way people deal with stress is they look for control. You guys were picking on Jordan Peterson about go clean your room. But the thing is, if you've ever had an angry teenager, what do they do when they're angry? They go move their shit around in their room. What do you do when you break up with someone? You get a new haircut. You change something about yourself. You grab these little aspects of control without even thinking about it, these micro moments that you can control. And that's what you focus on. And then you go, oh, I feel better about this whole big thing I can't fix because I cleaned my room, because I changed my haircut, because I bought some new shoes, whatever it happens to be for you. Mindfulness is that as well. It's being aware that like, gee, this person is telling me this information, but do they have a motive for it? Are they
sure?
As a therapist, I actually always have to tell people like, I have a bias here. Like I'm aiming for something for you to see it. Here's what I'm pushing for. I hope you want to get there too. Because otherwise I'm not being a genuine human being in that interaction. You have to tell people where you're coming from in my profession. So it helps to get that perspective on other interactions when you're like, oh, okay, so this person told you this, or this news story said this is true. Gee, I wonder why. I wonder what's in it for them. Or is there something in it for them?
Oh, no, my allusion to Jordan Peterson was, I recognize I've complicated. Wait, that's a whole other discussion, right?
So we don't need to talk about him. I could.
Oh, no. But it's like, I brought that up because I think I understand why his message lands the way it does for a certain segment of like the male population.
Oh,
not,
of course.
Yeah, not necessarily me, but I get it. I totally get it. If I'm 51, but if I was 24, 26 and I stumbled across Jordan Peterson, I could definitely see how it would have really.
Oh yeah, it's like Catcher in the Rye or Atlas.
Yeah.
If it gets you when you're 12, it makes total sense. But
right.
By the time you're in your middle years, the idea that other people should have restrictions on their freedom so that you have better chances to get a date just starts a little kooky.
Have you guys ever caught any of his actual class lectures? Not really his big media online anti-trans stuff, but the classroom lectures aren't that bad. I'm not a pro in this area like you guys, but I've found those at least to be pretty fascinating.
Yes and no. Like I think he skates very close to a line that I don't particularly like, which is this idea that there needs to be an overarching pattern of social norms that are enforced. And I think that framework itself is kind of dangerous the way he presents it. Otherwise, yeah, he's a pretty middle of the road dude with some very problematic ideas about authority and power. I think he just knows what buttons to push to make sure that the young right-wing folks are going to throw their money in his direction.
I saw a recent episode. He's back now. I don't know if you guys knew. He OD'd on, what was it, Valium, I think?
He survived his crazy Russian detox.
Yeah, he survived that. Maybe not the best move to make, but yeah, he's back. He's back on the internet, and I recently saw something where him and I think it was Brett Weinstein were talking, and Weinstein's another one of those that it's like you were saying, kind of middle of the road, starts making some good sense, and then just slips in something, just anti-gay or anti-trans or okay.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That was one of their points was whenever you're a child, you like to go through a lot of different personalities and you go through a lot of transitions. And kids today don't get that opportunity as much because we don't let them go out and play. They're always online. They're always playing video games. And then what happens? Their identities are confused and they become trans. And I was like, "What, man? You had me for a second."
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it starts to sound kind of deep and interesting psychologically, and then just left field.
It misunderstands being trans. Being trans is how you are.
Right.
Like people who are trans, they may not have a word for it, and they may not be able to describe it. And I mean, people crack on me all the time because I defend all the different whatever label people want to throw on themselves, including attack helicopter if they feel like it. I really don't care. Like if you're going to tell me that that's how you honestly feel inside yourself, I'll deal with it. Right. Because I've met people who don't have a gender, who are just like, none of this makes sense to me. None of this speaks to me. You all look like Martians. I have no idea what's going on. And then I've had other people who are like, look, some days I wake up and I feel like a girl. Some days I wake up and I feel like a boy. Kind of depends on the side of the bed I got up on. depends on my mood, depends on how things
really?
are going in my life. And you can work with either of those, and they're both valid experiences, but they're usually internal to the person. Like the difference between trauma-caused gender confusion and being trans is something that is very difficult to work out, but it's a real difference. It is a super real difference.
Yes.
Have you guys found anything that might be helpful in dealing with stress from not just the pandemic, but the things you guys were pointing out, like news, social media? Now we're supposed to be afraid of the border again. I hadn't heard about the border since 2016, and it's back, and it's overwhelming. And while I don't think we solved our immigration crisis, it's just convenient that right-wing media seems to really start trying to get their constituents really scared of immigrants. Sure. and hyperbolize their xenophobia. But just everything that's going on, that man, there's shootings now. We just got through the Capitol riot, and BLM seems to be quieting down, but about to pick back up soon. And just there's so much going on. What's some useful tactics that maybe the listener could use to just be able to manage the stress?
I think the biggest thing, although I'll put my own personal bias out there right out front, I really have a personal belief that the media in general wants you to be afraid. Sure. And so I remind people that, remember, that's how they make their money. So like, take a breath. If you're really worried about it, look up the statistics. But otherwise, just what you read from the CDC is the best advice I can give you. If this is scaring you, just turn it off. Most of it isn't real. Like our immigration policy has been just as screwed up since we stopped putting employers in jail and fining employers for hiring illegal immigrants and started criminalizing the illegal workers.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we used to be able to stop this right at the border, because if there were no jobs, only people would come to escape, refugees. Now we have a huge black market labor thing where people are going to come because they can get work here. Our whole meatpacking industry is built off that. A lot of our construction industry is built off of that.
Especially in Southwest America. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But turn it off if you can, or remember where it comes from. Remember what they're trying to sell. They want you to have that TV on all the time. They want you to be looking at their little runner at the bottom to see who got killed, who got blown up. I mean, it's why we hear about a school shooting from across the country, but you don't hear about like the 5 domestic shootings that happen in your next town over, which I will guarantee have happened since the last big mass shooting. That's scarier than just finding out that somebody got really drunk and shot their husband or wife. But both things happen. So I'd say turn it off as much as you can, and literally just remember where it comes from. We just had a alert come on our phones at the house just yesterday. And as soon as I looked at it, I thought, I wonder if the kids are going to be scared. And it wasn't, thankfully it wasn't an Amber Alert about, a missing kid or something, but it said something about, be on the lookout for a man with this particular description. He just shot a state trooper, and this happened in, this far, far away town. But the kids don't know the names of the towns in the area. They don't know that this is like 4 hours away, Right. And right. It popped in my head. I wonder if that's going to mess with them. And then I didn't think about it again. And it was just randomly later that day, they both were like just kind of looking at me. One of them goes, "So is that guy like going to come to our house or something?" And
oh, wow.
And they're, these are highly intelligent kids. They're, for teenagers, but they have no idea how vulnerable they are to just something that, trying to do the right thing, trying to put out a public service announcement, but it pops up on their phones at the same time. And they both are looking at each other like, uh-oh, we've got trouble. And there was no threat imminent to them at all. No, it's a perspective thing too. It's also, when is a warning necessary? When do you want people to be aware? I mean, one of my favorite kind of things that has come up as I got older is this. They used to talk to us about stranger danger. I don't know if you guys still talk to your kids about it, but when I work with teenagers now, I'm like, no, it's, remember that people with authority are the ones who are more likely to take advantage of you. Remember, it's your gym coach, it's your pastor, it's your priest, it's your Boy Scout leader. Who's most likely to be inappropriate, and, just going on about how to protect themselves and how to advocate for themselves, which doesn't work in the example of a shooting unless you just say, look, if you hear gunshots, run and hide. Right. Get out of that situation as fast as you can. But you're right. Like, that kind of warning system, even if it's well-intentioned, absolutely, yes, will have an impact. Like, if you scare people repeatedly in the same way, they will learn that that's normal. That's part of what they have to watch out for. That's a fact of life now. for them. And I mean, the kids with the shooting drills in schools, it's unbelievable how much of an effect that's had on their view of safety. I mean, it's actually much safer to be alive now than it was when Michael and I were kids. You were much more likely to get hurt or kidnapped or assaulted in the 70s and 80s than you are now.
Yes.
Weirdly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you wouldn't know it with the TV.
No. And there was virtually nothing on the media. Plus the media available to us at that time was three TV channels, 4 TV channels maybe, which the other psychological effect of that is we had much more of a common participation in sort of that media landscape and world, and now that's all sort of very fragmented and isolatory in its own. That's a whole other argument as well, psychologically.
I did a weird other caveat to that too. Like I think generationally, the boomers for all the things they did wrong, generally understood that children would eventually become adults, and so they allowed childhood to progressively become more and more independent. Yes. And allowed kids to fail and fall and screw up and go out on their own and do things wrong. And that's something I think a lot of my generation and have failed as adults to recognize, is that you can't keep your kids safe forever. You've got to teach them to deal with what's out there. And that too is mindfulness. Like if your teenagers don't know how consent works, can you send them on a date safely?
Correct. I have a beautiful memory of my mother sitting quietly and watching me basically set myself on fire. And then once everything was safe, she's like, well, you won't do that again.
Oh, yeah.
And people today wouldn't do that.
No, I mean, my parents let me go camping with my female and male friends at like 12, 13 years old, because they're like, yeah, your girlfriend isn't going to let you do anything stupid.
Yeah.
Your guys are going to be eating s'mores. That's about it. If you get the tent set up.
Right.
And they were right. I mean, that's the worst part. Like we didn't do anything stupid, crazy, because we knew we'd be out in the middle of the woods with nobody to come get us.
You got to admit, this generation that we are a part of, and the one that's growing up during this time, we've all seen some crazy stuff. This can't be normal. This can't be like what every generation goes through, right? I mean, it's you got 9/11, you got all the school shootings, you got COVID, you got war on terror, Trump. I just throw him in there somewhere.
I'd actually say, yes, I would agree with that. Actually, Michael, do you have anything to say? I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot.
No, I'm enjoying listening to you. No, you're hitting everything right on the head. I'm enjoying just listening. No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think Robert, you have a really good point. Like the generation that's growing up now is under a lot more existential stress than we were.
Yeah.
But like we had, the Cold War, we had the Challenger explosion, we had the fight to reunify Germany, which was a really interesting thing I remember from my childhood.
Yeah.
We had Iran-Contra, we had, all these things, and we are all living through the stuff the kids are growing up with. But weirdly, I mean, I hate to say it, but the fall of Rome, the collapse of an empire, it always takes more than a couple generations. It doesn't happen in like a weekend. And what we're watching is the American empire really struggling to unify when there's no support for what it's doing anymore. And so the media and the propaganda get really ramped up. And the threats that are really scary to the young people, climate change, the fact that they don't have any kind of future jobs that are going to pay them enough to live off of, and nothing in that regard is changing. When you're like a teenager, they're terrified of the stuff that the news isn't trying to scare them about. Like they're actually kind of blasé about the school shootings. Like they don't want it to happen, but they've been hearing about it all their lives. It's what's going to happen when I'm 30? What's going to happen? They know what to do if somebody comes into the school with a gun. It may not be good, it may not be fun, but they know what to do, which is really terrifying.
To add to what you're saying as well, what also we're living through, and over this past year, I think Trumpism was this huge magnifying glass on just how much we become fractured into these tribalist sort of clans in the United States. I don't know how we're going to survive this as a nation, or if we really will as a nation. I think America's power has been just decimated over the last several years because of tribalist factions we've basically broken into. But happily,
I think you're completely correct, but I think there's a pretty obvious cause of it. Like when
Sure.
I mean, the Pew did the research. I think it was Pew did the research where they realized a couple years ago that it does not matter what the American people want. Their government won't reflect it ever. Like, it doesn't matter who's in the office. It doesn't matter who's running for anything. It's going to be the same policies, except these very small social issues domestically. Are trans people? Can trans girls do sports? Like, we're going to argue about that for 9 months when the answer is pretty obviously yes, and legally should be very clear. But we're not going to talk about, should we go to war with Syria? Should we embargo Venezuela?
Are we going to keep spending, $1 trillion a year just on the Pentagon just to keep the lights on? It's just a baseline spending.
Do we keep turning foreign children into chunky salsa with bombs to make sure
basically
that oil stays at a stable price?
Right.
And the answer to those questions are always the same. And what the tribalism we see, I'm trying to remember who the quote's from, but it was the reason why office politics are so vicious is because the stakes are so small. Like, if you can't get your neighbors to recognize that maybe you want to own a gun safely, or maybe your trans kid deserves not to be beaten up all the time, like, that's going to drive you up a wall. But if it doesn't change the structure that's causing all this other stress, the economic collapse, the lack of jobs, and this is where kind of stress and mindfulness, invert themselves, because anybody who's paying a lot of attention is going to be under a massive amount of stress. And so the more you pay attention, the angrier you get. And it leads to these kind of stupid tribal associations. Because, like, look, all I have to do is pull this lever, and that's going to fix it. And if it's the blue lever, great. And if it's the red lever, great. But gee, neither of them seem to actually be fixing the things that I wanted fixed.
I think that's the basic challenge for me as a person that I've been struggling with, is trying to be informed, participate in local democracy as well, but also at the same time not lose fact that I want to increase my version of the other to include everybody, and I want to assist in ending sort of toxic nationalism and toxic tribalism, which I really detest and really want to play no part in. And I think coming full circle and answering back to an earlier question Robert asked is, what am I doing on a daily basis in my job to sort of help support that and focus that, and planting those seeds, I think, of self-awareness in my patients and clients' heads, as best I possibly can, while at the same time trying to help them become more functional in their environment. It's a challenge, and one has to be so careful and just, pick their battles wisely.
And to remember that we're in a pandemic and we're under a lot of strain, and that means you're a human being. You're not going to be functioning as well. Like, anybody who's struggled before is going to be struggling twice as hard. So, give yourself credit for surviving in the pandemic.
Yes.
Even if it means some days you crash out on the couch and binge watch 2 TV shows. I actually have been spending an awful lot of time on this ancient war game. It's like a civilization thing, but I'll blow 6 hours on it, and that's my recovery time for the week, because there's nothing real about it. I can turn it off when I'm done. And, being able to step away from the stress that is surrounding me because I've done all I can, acknowledging that I've done all I can. And with my clients, that's what I tell them a lot is, when you've done what you can, take time for yourself. You can't be more merciful to other people than you are to yourself at all.
That's your good job, man. That's your occupational therapy.
Here's one. You guys,
that's heartbreaking.
You guys might push back on this one, but what about racism? Could that also be a stressor that we're seeing all over the media? I mean, it's not that it doesn't exist and that we shouldn't address it, but it just seems like if you watch the news and you looked at social media, you would think that all your neighbors are white supremacists.
Oh, I live in Connecticut. A lot of them are.
So, dude, I live in Michigan. A lot of them are.
I hate to be the one to say it, but one of the jobs I did was I managed and was a therapist for a group home where kids who'd been taken into state custody lived. And I would say roughly 50% of the kids I got to see or got to oversee were, minorities. And so I've actually thrown the police out of the group home because of the way they were treating my kids. Wow. And I've gone to PPT meetings at schools because of the way the schools were treating my kids. And racism is so baked into the fabric of America that when you point it out, people think you're attacking America. Why can't my 2 black kids ride their skateboards up and down the street where 6 or 7 white kids do it all the time? Well, they might be selling drugs. Well, why do you think they're selling drugs?
Right.
Hold on. What about the white kids who, and frankly, in this particular instance, it was one of the white kids who was selling the drugs. But the cops were there only when it was the black kids, and people were calling the police only when it was the black kids. I have a client that I talk to a lot. He's a gig worker. He's a great guy. gentlest person in the world. He just happens to be like 6 foot tall and African American, and he gets stopped weekly by the police. So much so that he often doesn't even bring it up in therapy. He's just like, yeah, I got stopped again, spent 20 minutes with them running through my car, patting me down, screaming at me, but I got to my thing on time.
Yeah.
It's just so real.
So you would say that you would look at it the other way, where you would say that might actually be something that needs to be talked about, needs to be at the forefront of our discourse.
Yes. Yeah. And also too, I think along with that too, we don't, as Americans, we don't have the necessary language or lexicon of words to accurately talk about our classicism as well. And also be able to articulate where our classicism and racism and elitism all sort of intersect in a very dynamic way. And there's just not a lot of helpful conversations on that particular model. And that's what sort of interests me. So it can only have a dysfunctional outcome, a dysfunctional result. Yeah.
Well, our racism informs classism. I mean, if you can't get a job because of your skin color, you can't get an apartment, or you can't get a car.
Yes.
Your whole life is circumscribed by what other people think about you. And what really irritates me about racism is that this one point I'll make is that people think that they get to decide when they're being racist, and they don't listen when somebody else says, man, that's pretty racist. Like, I'll tell you, I had to learn this the hard way. Like, I was working with kids, Puerto Rican families a lot when I was younger, and I was starting to get really irritated when they would do the circular migration thing and send their kids back to Puerto Rico. And I'd be like, I was just about to get somewhere with this kid. What the hell? And then I was like, oh, wait, it's cultural. It's not like stupid. It's not race. It's not because they're dumb. It's like, this is what you do in your culture. If somebody's struggling, you send them to your grandparents because they're the wisest, oldest people you know. And once I kind of figured that out and realized I'd been kind of being a racist jerk, the work got a lot easier. Talking to other people got harder about it. But, racism is so endemic. It's so present if you're doing talk therapy with minority people. Like, it's really hard as a white guy to be like, yep, that sounds like a really valid experience. And it sucks.
Yeah.
What about the concept that while it is systemic, we seem to be running into a conflation issue sociologically, where we're saying, racism is embedded deep within the American culture, and I'm sure just as much in many other countries as well, but where we start saying, since it's everywhere, and by everywhere we mean within our systems, within our criminal justice system, within our employment system, within our economic system, but whenever we say it's everywhere, isn't that kind of conflating things a little bit, where this next generation is growing up thinking it's in everyone?
I think, honestly, I'd say you need to be open to that awareness. Like, if you grew up in a system that is racist, my grandfather was the nicest guy in the world, but he used the N-word like a punctuation mark. And he thought of himself as a very understanding guy. He served in World War II with a lot of minority people. He worked with minority people, was friends with them, but he was racist. And he, by the end of his life, I think he recognized how much he had to change. I'd say, actually, the thing about the young people recognizing racism as more of a personal responsibility is just that. If you make a crack that is racist, these kids will call you out on it. And I think that's actually much better than we were at that age. Like, I would have let it slide when I was a teenager, and now I try really hard not to. I think because the only way you change the society is by making it uncomfortable and making those values unwelcome.
The only thing I would want to add, and I'll try to say this carefully, is that as I try to develop myself to be just much more charitable to myself, but everybody around me, as I realize that most people are just not that articulate and not able to clearly articulate themselves in a manner that maybe as they really think their intentions appear to them as. So I think we do need to allow some people to make mistakes, say something really, really stupid, and accept their apology, without, I guess I'm talking about cancel culture and other things like that, without, they're losing their job or losing their livelihood. I guess that's the only thing I would kind of want to interject.
I would agree with that in general, but I think it's not just about an apology. It's about change. Like, one of the things, and I'll take it to something that isn't racism. Like, one of the things that really frustrated me in 2016 was when Hillary Clinton went on TV and was like, no, I've always supported gay marriage. And I'm like, I protested her from 2000 to 2014 on that, because I was very lucky. I worked an internship for GLBT youth, which really changed my life and my perspective. But, she just stood right up there and said, no, I've always been this way. I didn't, I never lied about it. I've never changed direction. And I'm sitting there going like, I've got a million recordings of you doing the exact opposite.
Exactly.
And so, the apology was there. The change was there, but no apology. Like, oh, well, I'm just going to change the way I act and pretend this bad stuff never happened. And that doesn't work either. Like, you've got to both apologize and own the thing you did. If I didn't own the fact that I was thinking really racist thoughts about some of my kids and have this conversation with other professionals, I don't think I'd be as good of a professional. You've got to do both. And a lot of people just want to do one or the other. They either want to change and never mention it, or they want to apologize and not change.
How for you when, if you remember back when Obama came out for gay marriage and he did the interview where he talked about how he changed his mind and everything, how did that land and how did that sit with you?
Well, I voted for him once. I'm more of a peace voter, so I didn't vote for him the second time. But I mean, again, if people legitimately change, I'm a therapist. I have to believe people can change. Right. I mean, otherwise, what the hell am I doing? But
do you extend that in that situation, though? So you didn't find his apology congruent with his change, or
I have a sneaking suspicion that there was some political forethought involved in that. But again, like, he was a kind, articulate man. He didn't have a huge history of being anti-gay. Unlike other people I may mention. But, that's the thing. Like, he didn't have a lot to apologize for, and he changed and did the right thing.
Okay.
Oddly, weirdly, I would put some parts of John McCain's career in that light as well. Like, he is a guy I don't agree with at all, 90% of the time. But occasionally he would just come out and go, you know what? I was wrong. This is what I think we should do now. And here's why I was wrong. And when people do that, you believe them. When people just go, oh, no, this has been the way I've done it. We've always been at war with East Asia. It's a problem. And I think that's where you get into cancel culture, is people are just like, well, I don't think I was being racist. And everybody else is going, well, you were. Right. Then, they're not going to keep their job. They're not going to. But if somebody came in and said, look, I shouldn't have said this. I was wrong. I apologize. And, I'm going to work to do better. And they mean it and they act like it. That'd be fine. But I didn't realize this was racist. Well, what good is that? If you don't know what you're doing was racist, there is no apology there.
Right. I guess I just want to make sure that when we're working for a more just society, that it's a reformative sense of justice and not a retribution, punitive and with retribution. Yes.
Well, but to counter that argument, though, cancel culture isn't punitive. It's free association. If your students at a college say, look, we don't want our money going to pay for these right-wing lunatics to have a space to talk, and this is where we want our money to go, and we're going to not come back here if you keep letting them talk. That's no different than any of the Christian schools going like, look, we're not going to let a gay drag show on campus because we think it's going to turn all our little guys gay. You can have a difference of opinion, but you're going to end up having to own the consequences of that. I think a lot of the frustration with cancel culture comes from the fact that right now the young people are really on the side of inclusiveness and equality, and vocally so and violently so occasionally. And so you can have these other opinions and you're welcome to them, and you can bring them out into the public square. But if you do, there might be a whole lot of people who show up and yell at you in the public square for their opinion. And they might find out where you work and go to your boss and go, look, your employee here was out there screaming the N-word at people. And if I was a boss, and I have been, and I heard one of my therapists was out screaming the N-word at people, we'd be having a real serious conversation about their employment, because I wouldn't want them associated with my business. Like, that would make all of the African Americans that come to us unwelcome.
Sure.
And so, it's going to suck if you lose your job for it. But man, if you, at least in my field, if you shoot your mouth off like that, you know you're getting fired.
Yes. Yeah.
Although we also have a professional code of ethics too, which I could always point to and say, look, you're violating the code of ethics. So out you go.
Hey, Mike, how would you feel about doing some guided meditation? I've asked you that before, and you were like, I'm down. The other times I asked you, and you were like, you can't just spring that shit on me, Rob.
Yeah, man, I'm really into breathing exercises right now.
That'd be great. I'd love to close us out with one.
Yeah,
we got a lot of positive feedback from the last time we did that. Would you be okay with that too, Dan?
Oh, help yourself.
Yeah, man. My favorite one is this box breathing technique that I have people do. It helps lower the heart rate and the blood pressure. And basically, it's very simple. You breathe in for 4 counts through the nose. You hold for 4 counts. You exhale for 4 counts through the nose. And then you hold the exhale for 4 counts. And then you repeat that cycle, basically. And it's all nasal breathing. It's important to breathe through the nose, both in and out. Breathing through the nose helps filter the air. It also helps condition the pressurized air in such a way to where your lungs can more efficiently process the gas exchange that happens in these small little sacs, basically in the lungs. And this is really, really important. It helps people who've had injury or lung damage be able to process air and oxygenate their blood a little bit more effectively. And of course, over this whole year of COVID, when I've been dealing with a lot of patients with lung damage, it's been very effective to help that heart rate kind of drop. So just kind of sitting up, nice and relaxed.
Okay, I'm going to do it with you.
Yeah, man, I'm sitting in a lotus position as we speak.
Awesome.
As I am most of the time when I'm able to. So make sure your shoulders are down, your head is up straight. You can feel your diaphragm drop nice and free. And if you notice when I do that, obviously the voice changes, because then the voice has automatically all this support that you're doing if you're not slouching or hunched over. And you just take a deep breath in over 4 counts. Hold it. Exhale. Hold. Breathe in. Hold it. Exhale. Hold the exhale. Breathe in. Hold it. Exhale. Hold. Breathe in. Hold it. Exhale. Hold. And relax. And so you can do that if you can keep that up for if you can start off for about a minute or 2, but keep it up to like 4 or 5 minutes, which you'll find that over time your body starts to relax. Your thinking tends to become more sparse and calmer, and you're able to focus better and be much more kind of hopefully at peace.
Yeah, I feel great. I don't feel the need to just randomly fill the quiet air with my nonsense. That's awesome. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate
Dan, it's been a pleasure listening to you, man. Thank you so much.
It's been really great having the conversation. I hope I didn't get too far out into left field, which is where I usually end up living. So
No. It's you have such a really lovely point of view, and your experiences are so fascinating to listen to. We should do this again sometime, man.
Anytime you want to have a conversation. I mean, like I said, I don't know how to get out of what I do professionally, so talking to people was kind of why I reached out to Robert in the first place. I really appreciate both the time you allowed me to speak and the opportunity you gave me in the first place. It's been wonderful. Anytime you guys want to have a conversation, let me know.
We gotta do this again.
Please.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you to Dan and Mike. Thank you to Dave Blair at DaveBlairMusic.com. Thank you to Feedspot.com for promoting the Right to Reason to the Top 10 Atheist podcast. Thank you to our patrons, Jason Parker, Freethinker215, Alan Marks, Philip Spawn, Bernard Lamberell, Enema Man, Larry Wilson, and our top supporter, Rob Montgomery. You can support this broadcast at patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Next week, I'm defending my objective morality argument against 2 atheists that don't believe objective morality exists. Between now and then, remember that you have the right to reason.
This is the Right to Reason podcast.